From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And hello again. Welcome to another edition of Chicago Newsroom right here on Can TV. I'm Ken Davis with the news that if you are planning to drive anytime in the next few weeks in Chicago, watch out, because Mayor Emanuel is watching you with a hawk eye and ready to, got the checkbook, or not the checkbook, but the ticket book out and ready to roll, right? Yesterday at City Council, a dramatic turnaround for some aldermen like Joe Moore, who has come around and decided that this is for the children, that we have to protect the children. And but we did see 14 votes yesterday against Mayor Emanuel's red light cameras, and of course we'll talk about the infrastructure thing too. But Charlie, you were there. I saw you there yesterday.
Good. Tell my boss.
Yeah.
So everyone knows.
The FM News 101 was all over the place. You were covering it like a big deal that it was, I guess.
Ham on rye.
So anyway, you're the Chicago bureau chief for FM News 101. You follow these things. What do you make of this speed camera thing? It was really interesting to see that aldermanic debate yesterday.
The mayor has said again and again, it's not a cash grab, and the mantra yesterday, as you heard from a number of aldermen, is if you follow the law, it ain't going to cost you a dime.
Right. Right. I always love that argument.
And the argument that it will change behavior. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that's kind of compelling. How many of us have gotten, a red light camera ticket? Right. And doesn't that make you stop and think a little more next time?
Yes, but what I found interesting was that when we were initially sold this revenue enhancement, we were sold it as protecting the children, because there was such a hue and cry about all the children who were being brutally killed outside of schools and parks. And then when the news media got hold of it and started looking at the numbers, they discovered that, oh, no, it's really not true. None of it's true. So instead of saying, oh, we don't need the cameras, what they did was, and I found this very interesting to listen to all the, about 10 aldermen who spoke in favor of it yesterday. They were speaking not so much about the children anymore. They were speaking about how we really need to calm our neighborhoods. We need to stop people driving through our neighborhoods at 45 miles an hour. So all of a sudden the narrative has changed, and I just thought it was a piece of very interesting work that the mayor did with selecting the aldermen to give the talking points.
I'm sorry, Cheryl, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say what I find interesting is the argument by some aldermen that, if you want to calm the neighborhoods and make things slower, insert speed bumps, which would be a lot less costly. Right. Would maybe have the same effect. I don't know. People might pay a little bit more attention if they have to pay $100 for.
Well, they actually gave one alderman a talking point about they had come up with an incident of a fire truck or I guess a fire department vehicle that was unable to get to a suffering child because it was delayed by 2 minutes because of all the speed bumps that it had to run over. So.
And they can't put speed bumps on the larger thoroughfares in the city.
Right.
That's troublesome.
Right.
I guess I tend to be optimistic, but I think you can take the mayor at his word when they talk about there will be lots of data available. Mm-hmm. It'll be possible to find out how many tickets were issued where, how this is working. Mm-hmm. And if the aldermen stick to their guns when that data becomes available, you can come back and take a look at it and say, did this make sense?
Here's what I think about that, if you care. Not that you care.
So what does that mean, though? Does that mean that, that you take cameras away at some point?
Right.
Or
here's the thing that I find most interesting about this is that if you get stopped on the Kennedy by a state trooper for speeding, it goes on your driving record, and I assume it's still the same thing. You get 3 of them and your license is taken away or is in jeopardy, right? These cameras, these operate in a whole different world. It doesn't go on your driving record. You just have to pay up a bunch of money. So if you really wanted to use these as an incentive, you would say these are legal speeding tickets just the same way as if the state police stopped you or the Chicago police stopped you, and you get 3 of these and you'll lose your license. Now that would be an incentive not to speed. But no, the real incentive is they want to ding you for $100. So please.
Or 35.
Yeah, 35, right.
With a warning period.
With a warning period. You get
usually
that free warning.
That's
yeah,
right.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Well, anyway, we could spend the whole day on this, and I apologize. I know our viewers probably are tired of hearing me go on and on.
They love
about
it.
this.
They love it.
The people want it. They want to protect the children. I know, and so we all want to protect the children.
You sound highly skeptical about this, I must say.
I've been around a while. I've seen these things happen, and it always cracks me up how it always starts out with the children. We're doing it for the children.
I think the bigger picture here is, I mean, we're moving toward a society, Chicago and elsewhere, where more and more public behavior is going to be monitored.
Absolutely.
It's just the way it's going to be.
Not only monitored, but regulated. I mean, it's not just that Big Brother is watching you. Big Brother is fining you when Big Brother doesn't like what you're doing. And this is the problem with my generation. We'll all be dead soon, so it's not going to matter. But
Please, no. Don't say it's not so, Ken.
but we just kind of have this memory of a time when it was kind of cat and mouse. If you did something wrong, they had to catch you. Some human being had to actually see you do it and write a report on it.
Well, the whole question of drones takes this to a third
Absolutely.
dimension. Once upon a time, there was a two-dimensional
Right,
barrier. If you
right.
couldn't be seen from the street level by a fence, fine.
Absolutely
but
right.
As more and more law enforcement agencies use drones, the
Right,
ability to
right.
look down on you from above is going to become more common.
If you're 25 and growing up in this culture and this society, it probably doesn't bother you the way it does folks who are a little older than 25. And this is just, as I said, it's just one of these things that society is changing, and we are all we're just being subjugated to robots and automated computer-operated devices. And some of us, we're not going quietly. So anyway, hanging in with City Hall yesterday, really that was just the sideshow, because the real interesting thing was this, whatever you want to call it, the infrastructure trust, which almost everybody seems to think is probably a good idea, getting the private sector involved in funding some of the bigger infrastructure things that we all agree we need. But this thing has a kind of a weird smell to it, and so the mayor decided to defer and publish, to hold off until next Tuesday, as though these extra 4 or 5 days are going to bring enlightenment and everything's going to be okay.
I pressed the mayor's staff on how, after his news conference yesterday, how and when he changed his mind.
Uh-huh.
The most I've been able to get out of him is Tuesday night before the council meeting, he went to dinner. As he was riding around, thought, well, maybe we should delay. Maybe a few days will give people a chance to come to peace with it. He thought more about it Wednesday morning before the council meeting during his regular workout, and then decided shortly before the council meeting to delay it for 6 days.
Wow.
I was just going to say, I find this very interesting because when this was initially proposed and you had the mayor's chief financial officer coming forward and saying, no way, no delay, this has to happen and it's going to go. And you had Alderman balk at that and say, look, you're going to just ram this down our throats, or what's going to happen here. And I think that Mayor Emanuel wanted to appear, or is conciliatory at some point here, and saying, okay, well, I am going to back off. The alderman had asked for a month. I'm not going to give you a month, but I'll give you a week. So I think maybe it's just to at least give some sort of impression that there is going to be some compromise here.
Well, it was interesting in the back room where all the interviews were going on yesterday. Alderman Pat Dowell from the 3rd Ward was talking about how she, I know you were part of that interview, but it was just fascinating. She said she thought he had at least 40 votes. He had more votes than he had on the red light cameras. And she was one of them. She was going to vote, but she had turned around. Tell me that story. She had turned around at the last
She was
minute.
very critical in the committee hearing and voted against it, the infrastructure trust plan, partly on concerns about freedom of information, aldermanic power. Apparently, after that vote, was one of possibly other aldermen who were approached by the mayor and his staff. I like to joke about thumb screws being involved. I don't think thumb screws are being involved, but shortly after that conversation,
figuratively speaking,
it's interesting. The mayor's office issued her statement saying her concerns have been addressed. She changed her mind.
I thought that was remarkable. I mean, I have to say, just watching her kind of do that dance in front of the media yesterday, she had called her public relations person to say, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to change this, we're going to put out a statement, and before they could even get the statement written, the mayor's office had already put it out for her. So that's...
She seemed a little befuddled by that.
Welcome
how
to
that
Chicago.
Yeah.
And welcome to the city council.
The
Form
interesting thing
number 343A.
The interesting thing for me about the infrastructure trust is this question the mayor just refuses to answer.
Yeah.
He said, and his staff has said, Lois Scott, his chief financial officer, have said, we're going to get the money, we're going to use it to retrofit Chicago public buildings so they're more energy efficient.
Right.
Okay, fine.
Who's against that?
Yeah, who's against it?
Right.
Easy.
It's like the children.
But the mayor has portrayed this as a big idea, a big way to address so many of the city's problems, but then you ask him, what else? And I asked him yesterday, maybe Wrigley Field improvements, maybe a casino. He said no, it's about infrastructure.
Right.
And his answer, and it's funny, I picked up the Onion on my way here today.
To quote the America's most trusted news
the
source.
headline, well, you know, they're often so right on. The headline in this week's Onion is, Obama launches more realistic, quote, I have big ideas, but we'll see how it goes, campaign slogan. And it's interesting that the president's former chief of staff, now the mayor of Chicago, has basically said that about the infrastructure trust again and again.
Trust me.
You know, it's a great thing, but right now we're just going to start with this small little project.
It's going to be big.
And we'll see how it goes. He's used those words. We'll see how it goes. And then we ask, we'll see how it goes.
Well, I found it interesting yesterday at the press conference that he was talking about the $7 billion that are about to be spent, and that this is only about $250 million of that $7 billion.
It's a small part, and the rest of it's already been approved in large part.
So,
the water bill increases, the other tax increases for the schools,
which of course is not the way it was portrayed when he first announced it, because this is really big. We're going to spend $7 billion rebuilding the city of Chicago, and then a number of reporters pointed out that of that $7 billion, most of it had already been announced, pre-announced, re-announced, and was being re-announced, and that kind of like doesn't add up.
It was actually in his speech. I mean, his speech, clearly the headline he wanted, the headline he got that day was $7 billion.
Right.
But the speech nuanced it. You know, if you listened and read it carefully, it was, this has already been approved, the revenue streams are already in place, and also the infrastructure trust, which hasn't been. So, I haven't been trumpeting it, but
when I worked in the mayor's press office, when I was on the other side, we always joked about everything being pre-announced, announced, and then re-announced, because you get at least 3 hits at the media on anything. You know, we're going to paint this school, and then the next day we're painting this school. We've painted. But Mayor Emanuel has taken
it's like
that.
Latin.
Yeah.
Conjugation.
That's right. But Mayor Emanuel has taken this to like a level that I can only just stand in awe of.
5. I think it's gone from 3 to 5.
5 announcements. But I'm sorry. I know I do sound very cynical sometimes on this program, but
I think that's your charm.
The thing that he chose to use as his example of the kinds of things that are going to bring the money to the table was retrofitting the 911 center. Well, again, I hate to keep doing this age thing, but it was only 14 years ago. I was there the day they announced that this was going to be the most environmentally friendly building the city of Chicago had ever built, and it was. I mean, it is. It's a very well built building. This was in the days when Mayor Daley had money for marble, so everything was built very, very well. Now, by today's standards, maybe it needs a little tweaking, but that wouldn't be the building I would choose to say, as he said yesterday, this building is just leaking energy all over the place. It's an emergency. We've got to get in there and retrofit the 911 center. Okay.
Good question. He also mentioned,
though, won't it?
Huh?
It'll be easy to fix, though.
It won't take long, right?
Low-hanging fruit. He also mentioned the cultural center, which is substantial, but great
but
question.
again, I'm sorry. The cultural center was ripped to shreds in the mid to late 80s, maybe around 1990. They put all new systems in there, put the double windows in. I mean, that building has been done.
That's the mystery. You know, okay, so you're right. So energy retrofit, not that big a deal. Why is this so important? Why does it have to be rushed through?
Right.
What else could it be used for?
And he
No
actually,
answers.
now I'm probably terribly misquoting the mayor in this yesterday, but I believe he said something to the effect that, you know, we've got to get this started. We've got these buildings that are leaking all this energy.
No.
This is an emergency.
It's an apt paraphrase.
Okay, well, anyway. And also, gas is cheaper now, so the amount of money that you save retrofitting is actually going down. That's another whole, I mean, we could do a half-hour show just on the science of retrofitting buildings, but we'll.
Yeah, well, and that's, you know, what happens to the investors if the city's savings from energy efficiency movements go down? How does the city pay it back?
Well, exactly.
And the answer we've gotten is from Lois Scott, and I'm going to paraphrase here. Well, that's goes into the detail of negotiating how this is going to work, and that doesn't happen until after we have a deal.
Right.
But if I were a private investor, I'd want to structure it in such a way that I don't get stuck not getting paid
there you go.
just because the city's not saving much money 2 or 3 years down the road.
That's the part that none of us can understand. Yeah. It's sort of this.
And that's why the aldermen have asked for an additional month.
An additional couple of days.
Well,
right?
they did get an additional
getting a couple of days. But it's all ridiculous anyway. The votes are there. He's got them in the bag. He's got at least 40 votes. I mean, it's going to sail through on Tuesday. So.
He said it. He said it would. He said it would pass.
Yeah.
And
even the opponents say it will pass. So there you are. Well, that's our, ladies and gentlemen, that's our civic lesson today for the city of Chicago and how it works behind the scenes. And we haven't even introduced Cheryl Corley from NPR.
I've just been jumping in.
Well, actually, you know, we just sort of got started with the show, and you know, I just want to change the subject completely because to go from the kind of the weird news to the very serious news. One of the intriguing parts about your job is that you seem to kind of sit there in the bureau in Chicago, and then you get this phone call saying, in 3 hours you have to be, you know, in such and such a place and have a report for us for all things considered in 2 hours. And I still don't understand how you do your job, but you got what I think would be one of the worst calls this week because, or not, in a couple of weeks ago, because you got sent down to jump into the Trayvon Martin mess, and I just don't know what it must be like to be a reporter, to have to sort of parachute into the most emotional story that's going on in the country. Almost anything you would report, I would seem to me both sides would be tearing at you and saying you didn't get it right.
Oh, actually, sometimes that's true.
Yeah.
But in those kinds of situations, people want their stories told.
Yeah.
You know, so they can be very open with you and very honest about what they think. And I think that's what happened both in the Trayvon Martin case and in another shooting case that I went to in Tulsa, which was literally get down there pronto and turn stuff around.
Amazing.
When I actually ended up in Florida, it was kind of the lull between rallies. So my charge was really to do a profile about the prosecutor in the case, Angela Corey. So I was able to really talk to people and get their thoughts about Tulsa and what had happened. I'm not Tulsa, about Florida and Trayvon Martin and what had happened. And what was interesting was the response of people there. We talk about you know, a big racial divide, and there is one, but I think that everybody there wanted to get to the bottom of this. And in some instance, although they might have been weary of the publicity, were actually glad that something was going to happen, so you know they could get to the bottom of what had actually gone wrong here. So that's what it was like when I was there.
You know, I wanted to talk to you about this as a reporter who has to kind of deal with all of the intricacies of these issues, and also as a Chicagoan, because I can't really articulate how I feel about this, and I don't know anybody who's done a very good job of doing it either, so I guess we're not alone in this, but there's something that bothers me about living in the city where we seem to be leading the whole nation in murder and
it's
mayhem.
like, why not here? Why not do stories about this situation?
Yeah, I guess that's part of it, and part of it is a kind of almost a sort of lack of compassion about this story. That it's like, you want to talk about tragic shootings. I mean, that's just a Thursday afternoon here in Chicago,
Or a second,
or
two.
yeah, or right.
Yeah.
So I don't know where that leads. It's not a question, but it's just sort of a Chicago thing that I find myself.
It's absolutely. It was very interesting because I mentioned I went to Tulsa as well, where it was kind of a racially charged incident where you had two white men going into a black neighborhood and shooting five people, five black people, and three of them died. And what was interesting when I talked to people there, and somebody asked me, they said, "Well, where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Chicago." And they were like, "Well, what are you doing down here?" And it was like, well, you do have a point there. But I think what really drew people and why that the Trayvon Martin story became such a huge event was because of the specifics about the case.
Yeah.
I mean, in Chicago, we're talking often about gang warfare. Right. And in this instance, I think it's something that people can really identify with. You have two individuals. It's kind of this
the profiling,
the racial profiling angle, the sense of is there going to be justice just in getting charges, and you have to remember that for many weeks, that wasn't a national story.
Right.
At all.
The family made it a national story.
The family
right?
made it, and kind of galvanized folks to get people to follow it.
Charlie, you, as an on the street working news guy who covers Chicago, whose bureau is Chicago, I mean, should we be taking this seriously? What appears to be this huge spike in violence or in murder and mayhem, or is it a statistical anomaly? I mean, I feel a little nervous about getting all riled up about it because it might just be something that is seasonal. I don't know how to approach it.
And I can't shed much light on that.
Yeah.
Mayor Emanuel has said on a number of occasions that when anyone is killed on the streets of Chicago in any neighborhood, all of Chicago needs to take that seriously.
Sure, of course.
So far, those are just words. I mean, what does that mean if you're in Rogers Park and you learn of a horrific shooting down in Englewood, or vice versa?
Or in Rogers Park.
Right.
These
Right.
days.
Yes.
Or pick your neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What is someone in another neighborhood to do about a problem outside of, in general, supporting changes in the law, dutifully writing, your alderman or your member of Congress? Right. I don't know. There's also, at City Hall, filtering this through that lens, an interesting subtext to all of this, which is just a few weeks, maybe just a few days before Chicago had really warm weather, Mayor Emanuel said at a news conference, "I don't buy into this theory that warm weather is responsible for more violence." Then, of course, temperatures spiked, and so did the violence in Chicago. I don't think the mayor's been called to task or asked yet whether he's willing to revisit that. But
I mean, a topic that is beyond all of our pay grades is whether or not these changes that are being made or have been made at the Chicago Police Department, we hear lots and lots of talk about all the consultants and all the new theories of the week that are being, that are being initiated, and then it doesn't seem to have any effect. If anything, the numbers seem to go up. I mean,
well, it's very interesting to me because, I think that when the mayor came into office, he made it very plain that he was going to change things at the police department. And I wonder now if he has, any regrets about that, because some of the procedures and the policies are different, and, I would think that weather would be one thing, but I think that, there are a lot of things that go into a rise in
Yeah,
crime,
yeah.
and policing strategy would have to be one of the things that we'd have to consider.
I certainly have no view whatsoever on what a good policing strategy is. I wouldn't know one from, but it seems to me that one thing that does appear to me, and it seems to be parallel to what's happening in the schools, is that we seem to be changing strategies a lot, or at least talking about how we have to throw everything out and try a whole new strategy. And I don't know.
I'm at the edge of my expertise here, so I don't want to go too far.
I think that's true for all of us, and we have to be very careful.
But from what I know, I think there are some things that are beyond police control.
Yeah.
Beyond immediate government control. The big factors in crime are drugs and poverty. And what can a police department do about those is a good question. How can you address the underlying factors that drive people to commit violent crime?
But of course, we do have a situation where we appear to be in worse shape than the other major cities in the country, and those all are things. Hey, let's lighten things up a little bit and talk about Wrigley Field. Mayor Emanuel says he wants Fenway Park in Chicago.
He hasn't actually said that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize, Mr. Mayor.
It's been reported.
It's been reported by
that
Fran Spielman that he believes that. That's right. Fran Spielman thinks that Rahm Emanuel thinks that he. Yeah. Okay. So
all the
his phrase
headline
is,
writers.
You're ascribing to me motives that I have not expressed.
Fran Spielman's headline writers think that Mayor Emanuel wants Fenway Park in Chicago. So does he? I mean, would it
somewhat
would
similar
it be good?
to. I mean,
Seems like it's a good idea to me.
I mean, he wants to, open up the have more let Wrigley Field be able to have more advertising, be able to bring in more money, close down the streets occasionally to have street fairs before games.
The streets are functionally closed down anyway.
Yeah, well, that's right.
So in that sense, following some of the procedures, some of the practices that have taken place at Fenway Park.
And sometimes had a kind of an interesting follow-up yesterday when they went to Boston, where they do close the streets around Fenway Park, and apparently all the bars who were upset about it, they're now perfectly happy with it because more people come,
right.
So whatever. Well, we've just run out of time.
Really?
I know, it's impossible. I mean, we didn't talk about
I want
NATO.
you to be my dentist from now on. Just really quickly.
Are we going to survive?
I like my dentist, by the way.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, you want to spend 3.5 seconds? Are we going to survive NATO? 1?
Yeah.
Yeah. 2?
I hope so.
Okay. And that's our deep analysis of the NATO conference coming up here. You have been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV. You can find us right here on cable, but you can also see this address down here. You can see us online at that any old time at all. You can check us out there. You can subscribe on iTunes. I want to thank Charlie Meyerson and Cheryl Corley for being with us today. I'm Ken Davis, thanking you for joining us, and whether you like it or not, we'll be right back here next week on Chicago Newsroom. See you next time.